Hey guys, tonight we slip past the candle-lit doors of a smoky Venetian salon. You hear lute music drifting through heavy brocade curtains, perfume mingling with the sharp sweetness of clove wine. The floors creak under velvet shoes. Men with embroidered collars lean a little too close, and there you are, not some cloistered princess in a stone tower, but something more dangerous, a courtesan. You're wearing a gown worth more than a shoemaker's annual wage, and it's not even yours. You're hired beauty, hired charm, hired cleverness. You're here because your face is a ticket, and your wit is a weapon. And no, you probably won't survive this life for long. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments so we can see where the midnight magic is happening. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive in Venice in the late 1400s. The city stinks of fish and incense. It's beautiful and rotting at the same time, like a fruit left just a day too long on a silver plate. You're 16, maybe 17, young enough to still look soft, old enough to be noticed by men who matter and men who don't. Your mother once scrubbed rich people's floors, but she had a sharp eye. She taught you to read, taught you to sit quietly, taught you that smiling without showing teeth makes people trust you. A courtesan in this world is not just a woman who sleeps with men for money. That's too crude and not entirely accurate. You're more like a walking illusion. You blend the refinement of a noble woman with the flexibility of a market vendor. You aren't nobility, but you know their poems. You aren't clergy, but you can recite psalms. And you definitely aren't anyone's wife, but you know how to listen. Like one. At first, you think this life will be easy. You think you're clever enough to stay out of trouble. You believe, foolishly, that if you're good enough, charming enough, maybe even lucky enough, someone will fall in love with you and pull you out of it. They don't. Instead, you become furniture in a room full of men, a pretty thing, passed from gaze to gaze. You're introduced to the game slowly. Older courtesans teach you how to pace your glances, when to speak, how to correct a nobleman's Latin without him realizing you've done it. One leans in and tells you, flatter his mind, never his looks. Looks fade. Minds just get worse. He won't notice if you steer the conversation. Historians still argue whether these salons of women actually influenced politics or merely entertained the men who did. But you see the truth firsthand. Power floats through these rooms like smoke, and every so often you manage to inhale just enough to feel dizzy with it. The men who visit you are not farmers or smiths. They are senators, merchants, traveling bishops, or artists looking for a wealthy muse. They come because their wives can't or won't speak freely, because they want advice without judgment, or because they want pleasure without responsibility. Often all three. And so, You build your persona. You become the one who listens, or the one who laughs, or the one who can quote Ovid from memory. Whatever works. You learn that men don't really want honesty. They want the feeling of being understood, just enough to tip a coin your way. So, you feed it to them, one gentle nod at a time. Your rooms are small, but always candlelit. Never let a man see you by sunlight unless he's already paid. You use olive oil for your skin, rouge made from crushed beetle shells, and a tiny bit of lead powder. Because pale is fashionable this year. Yes, lead. No, you try not to think about it too much. A quirky fact. Courtesans like you once used crocodile dung mixed with honey as a form of contraceptive. Doesn't work, but it smells strong enough to scare the idea of children away. So maybe there's some logic to it. You begin to keep a small notebook carefully hidden beneath floorboards. It's filled with fragments, names, what they like to be called, who hates whom, who owes what. You record a senator's weakness for orange wine, a merchant's limp, a painter's fear of crows. This notebook is your shield. You don't write how you feel. That's not useful. Some nights, when all the guests are gone, you sit alone and listen to the water slap against stone. You touch your face in the mirror, wondering if the new mole will matter. You think about your younger sister, still safe in the convent, too clever, too angry. You hope she stays there forever. One night, an older man grabs your wrist a little too tightly. You smile anyway. Later, he leaves you a ruby ring. You immediately pawn. You learn that real power is saying no and still keeping the client. But you're not quite there yet. When you walk through the city, cloaked and hooded, you're invisible. Some people know what you are. Some guess. Children stare. Old women spit near your feet, though never directly at them. A few days later, you're invited to recite Virgil to a bored Florentine ambassador. He offers you a book. You trade it for 3 weeks' rent and a jar of foreign perfume. You never regret it. Oh, and if you're wondering why no one just rescues you from all this, well, because courtesans don't marry. Not in Venice, not officially. If you're lucky, you get a patron. If you're clever, you get 2. If you're brilliant, you play them against each other and still get paid. You're not a duchess. You'll never be one. But for a few years, maybe less, you are the reason poets stay up late and painters ruin their eyesight. You're not respected, but you are remembered. You're not a noblewoman, and you know it. That title, Donna Nobile, is reserved for women who were born wrapped in legal protections and heirlooms, not for those who earn their diamonds. One awkward poem at a time, but walk through the Piazza San Marco with your veil just slightly askew, and tell me who draws more stares, you or the Duchess in mourning, black. Your slippers whisper across the marble as men pause mid-sentence to glance your way, not because they love you. No, it's fascination, it's scandal, dressed in satin. The thing no one tells you when you start this life is how tightly the law watches the government of Venice, for all its love of poetry and pageantry. keeps one strict eye on women like you. You are filed, licensed, and taxed like a tradesperson. Courtesans must register with the city, swear they will not corrupt noble bloodlines, and here's the kicker: agree not to dress like proper ladies. Historians still argue whether these laws were moral panics or economic policies in disguise. But one thing is clear: you are regulated like a bakery, not a human being. So, when you get your first real client, a man with a thick beard and a limp from a crossbow mishap, you also get your first lecture from an older courtesan named Lucia. She's kind in a cutthroat way. Remember, she says, slicing quince for her breakfast. They want you to act like a wife, but never become one. You learn early that being articulate is a double-edged sword. Men love that you know who Horace is until you outquote them. You begin mastering the art of underplaying your intelligence. Ask questions you already know the answers to. Giggle sometimes. Pretend to forget details, just enough to seem harmless. But you're watching always. You watch how wives walk measured and veiled, how widows carry their rosaries like shields, how noble girls travel, flanked by servants, as if the very air might stain them. And you, the courtesan, walk alone. Still, some men seek you out, not for pleasure, but for conversation. There's one, a bald scholar from Bologna, who brings you volumes of Aristotle. You discuss ethics while he sips almond milk and pretends he isn't falling in love. You pretend not to notice when he cries the day he leaves. You live in the liminal. You're not a housewife, but you know more about household accounts than most. You're not a nun, but you keep a crucifix above your bed. You're not a prostitute, though the line is drawn by something no wider than a silk thread. Quirky fact: in Renaissance Venice, courtesans were often forbidden from wearing certain colors, especially violet and crimson, because they were too close to noble styles. So you get creative. You line your gowns in gold thread, wear scandalous shades of deep indigo, and invent a new shade of blue-green that becomes your signature. You're not just a woman anymore. You're an aesthetic. You're the scandal that dances just out of reach. But even as you rise in elegance, the whispers grow louder. Moralists rant from pulpits, railing against the painted serpents who bewitch their husbands. A Dominican friar warns that women like you will burn in hell with their jewels still stuck to their skin. You nod along, smile, know full well that the same friar keeps a letter from you hidden in his robes. You play this game long enough, you begin to see its cracks. One evening, a noblewoman corners you at a feast. She's had too much sweet wine and too little patience. You think they love you? She hisses. They laugh at you. You're just practice. You could slap her, or cry, or explain that love isn't the goal. It's leverage. Instead, you lift your goblet and say, "Then I must be very good at it." You're no stranger to veiled insults. The wives scorn you, even though their husbands smile wider after visiting you. The city tolerates you barely. There are laws to protect you, yes, but also laws to control you. You're legally allowed to own property. But if you marry, you lose everything. You can sue for payment owed. But if you do, your reputation gets dragged through the mud faster than your debts get settled. Still, you persist, because, unlike noble women, you can earn, you can learn, you can leave. Your education, ironically, surpasses that of most respectable women. You can write in 3 languages. You've read Dante's Inferno twice, and not just the bits about lust. You've studied the humors, understand herbal medicine, and once advised a senator on trade routes because his maps were upside down. He never noticed you're living a strange contradiction, free and trapped, respected and reviled. The best nights feel like flying. The worst feel like drowning in perfume. There's a saying among courtesans: only fools fall in love with the man who pays a jazz. But everyone falls for someone eventually. Yours is a young poet with a crooked tooth and a talent for metaphors that make no sense. He compares you to the moon, a swan, and the whisper of citrus wind. You pretend to be flattered. Then you kiss him like you mean it. You never see him again. There's something else no one warns you about. Loneliness, not the loneliness of being alone. You rarely are, but the loneliness of never being fully seen. Everyone sees the role, so you play the mask, the gown, the laughter, but not the tired feet beneath your slippers, or the book you read alone by candlelight. Still, you walk with pride, not because you're humble, but because you're not. There's no finishing school for courtesans. But don't worry. You're about to get an education that would make a bishop blush and a philosopher jealous. It starts in a private chamber, lined with tapestries, the air thick with sandalwood smoke. You're not alone. Sitting across from you is Contessa Fiore, a woman so elegantly terrifying she could make a Medici stutter. She's not just a courtesan. She's the courtesan, the kind whose name is whispered like a spell. And today, she's your tutor. You think this is about lying on silks and eating oranges from a lover's hand? She says, already annoyed. Wrong. It's politics. It's theater. It's mathematics wrapped in velvet. She tosses you a small jar. Inside, crushed rose petals, mixed with powdered pearls. That's for your cheeks. Use too much. You'll look like a corpse. Too little, and he won't notice you over his soup. So begins your training. You're taught how to walk glide, really, with your weight on the balls of your feet. So you never stomp like a market girl. You learn to enter a room with just the right amount of presence, enough to turn heads, not enough to look like you're trying. You're taught how to laugh softly, even when the joke is bad. Especially when the joke is bad. That's where most men hide their insecurity. They teach you how to read a man's shoes. No, seriously, a scuffed heel, too many nights stumbling out of brothels, new souls, recently promoted, foreign buckles, possibly a diplomat. These things matter. And language, oh, language. You already know how to read, but now you're learning how to perform. You memorize poems, fables, bits of Ovid and Petrarch, then learn how to recite them like a flirtatious lullaby. Never correct his Latin. Fiore warns, unless he's drunk or in love. Then it feels like affection. You're also taught how to lose games on purpose. Chess, dice, tarot, just enough to let him feel clever. But every time, you're secretly counting coins, measuring pride, storing intel. Historians still argue whether courtesans received this level of elite training in formalized ways, or if it evolved organically through mentorship. But in your case, it's as methodical as any monastery curriculum. Except you study how to pour wine, not prayers. And oh, the wine. You're taught to sip without staining your lips, how to fake intoxication, just enough to make a man confess things he'll regret. Not political secrets, usually. More often, it's things like how his wife hates his dog, or that he dreams of opening a bakery. You listen as if these details are sacred. One fringe tidbit. You learn to mix your own perfumes. Most courtesans do. The base is always civet or musk animalistic, a little dangerous. Then come the layers. Bergamot, crushed lilac, ambergris. Yes, from Wales, and a touch of rosemary to keep